But first tonight, to Penny Wong's disgraceful vote at the United Nations. Once again, the Albanese government was out of step with the United States by not voting against a pro-Hamas resolution. Now, this was the first motion put forward by the Palestinian Authority since the UN rewarded it for the October 7 massacre by giving it a de facto seat at the table back in May. A move that in itself is a joke. They're giving the Palestinians, where in Gaza the governing body is a terror regime, a seat at the table at the UN. The UN created in the wake of the Holocaust and World War II. It's a joke. A motion for peace should have been, if there was going to be one, should have been submitted by a third party, another country. It could have been balanced. It could have demanded the release of the hostages and condemned the slaughter of October 7. But the UN has lost all reason. Instead, the first motion put forward by the Palestinians and sponsored by dozens of other mostly Muslim nations called for Israel to get out of Gaza and the West Bank within a year, no conditions attached. No concern about innocent hostages, including baby Kafir Bibas and his brother Ariel. It actually calls for Israel to pay reparations, even to terrorists, and wants an international commission of inquiry set up to effectively dismantle Israel as a Jewish national home. This resolution at the UN turns October 7 into the Palestinian Independence Day. It rewards terror. Both the former Australian ambassador to Israel, Dave Sharma, and Colin Rubenstein spoke this week on the show about just how extreme the resolution is.
That this is a one-sided inflammatory resolution that will do nothing to advance the cause of peace.
It's ultra extreme. It's basically calling not only for the isolation of Israel, but the delegitimization of Israel and ultimately its dismantling. So it's an omnibus resolution.
And even the Biden administration spoke publicly about how disgraceful this UN resolution is.
1 year since 1,200 citizens from Israel and many other countries were massacred, and hundreds more taken into the tunnels beneath Gaza, where many still wait in captivity today. Enough is enough. We urge all council members with influence over Hamas to join others in pressing its leaders to stop stalling.
And this is now creating somewhat of a diplomatic rift between the United States and Australia. The Biden administration had strongly lobbied Penny Wong to vote against the motion. She ignored them. And in a way, she might have even supported the motion had it not been for the US's efforts. In a way, there's nothing more depressing than looking at the UN vote result, seeing how much of the world is currently against Israel. Only 14 countries against the motion in support of Israel, while there were 124 voting in support of the Palestinian motion. Voting against it was the United States, Argentina, and Australia's closest Pacific partners, PNG and Fiji. 43 countries abstained, including Australia, Canada, Germany, Italy, the UK, Austria, India, Sweden, Switzerland, Ukraine, and others. And by the way, many of those world leaders paid solidarity visits to Israel right after the October 7 attacks. So how can they have forgotten that 100 people still are held hostage? Then among the 124 countries that supported the Palestinian motion, New Zealand, France, Indonesia, Japan, Spain, South Africa, and many more. Now, as you know, Australia has led the world in giving almost 3,000 visas to Gazans, mostly without proper security checks. But what's fascinating is that most of the countries voting yes in that Palestinian motion, supporting the Palestinian motion, well, they're taking in very few, if any, Gazans. So this is a classic case of virtue signalling. Now, Penny Wong today, in a media interview and in a press conference, said she would actually have liked to have supported this motion.
We would have preferred to have been in a position where we could support a resolution that reflected the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion, and we worked very hard in New York with other countries to try and get changes to the resolution that would enable us to support it.
Now, she's showing anti-Israel bias there, but we also saw anti-Israel bias from the press gallery. Listen now to this question that one SBS journalist asked Penny Wong.
Just on the UN vote, a lot of people around Australia feel like the government isn't doing enough to pressure Israel in this conflict. You had an opportunity where the majority of countries around the world voted in favour and only a few abstained or voted against. Does this send the wrong message to people in Australia that, we're not doing that?
Well, that's some activism at the SBS. A young journalist in Canberra assuming that a lot of people around Australia feel the same way she does, feel that the government isn't pressuring Israel enough. And Penny Wong took the opportunity to highlight all the things Australia was doing for Hamas-controlled Gaza.
You've seen us vote in a vote that was highly criticised by some for greater recognition of the Palestinians' delegation at the United Nations. You've seen us put sanctions on settlers. We don't export weapons to Israel, and we will continue to look at ways we can add our voice to a pathway out of this conflict, because we also want peace in the Middle East. And we regret that we were not in a position to support this resolution alongside the United Kingdom.
And then the statement that the Australian UN representative James Larson gave also very clearly outlined all the anti-Israel positions that the Albanese government has taken. Have a look.
We doubled our funding to UNRWA because it does vital work. We have not supplied weapons to Israel in at least the last 5 years. We have moved our position on recognition. We now see recognition as an integral part of a peace process and as a way to contribute meaningfully towards the realisation of a two-state solution. It's a matter of when, not if.
You wouldn't have seen comments like that coming from the UN representative under the former coalition government or Labor governments in the past. There's no question. Now, James Larson, who you just saw speaking there, he's a career diplomat, and he does have to deliver the lines drafted by Canberra. Yet this is still embarrassing for him, given he used to be highly respected as the former ambassador in Israel. Now, while this vote that we've seen at the UN, it is depressing, but it's not surprising. Ever since Israel's creation, whenever the Arab group has tabled a resolution at the UN, it does automatically achieve majority support. But what matters is how the like-minded nations vote. And it's concerning that only the US voted against it. But like I said, this is now a forum for left-wing virtue signallers and show ponies. And ultimately, the United Nations, while a disgrace, is irrelevant. And Israel showed that yet again last night. As the UN moved a motion against it, we presume Israel carried out yet another stealth operation against Hezbollah, this time blowing up their walkie-talkies. It's brilliant and genius. But the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he was deeply alarmed by this, by terrorists being killed. His comments render him an object of ridicule and utterly inconsequential. The lesson is that the sophisticated assault on Hezbollah this week, attacks beyond the capability or imagination of any other intelligence agency around the world, unprecedented in their brilliance, shows that Israel will defend its citizens, irrespective of the corrupt United Nations. The Jewish commitment to survival, espoused by the Israelis, is no holds barred. It's uncompromising, and it should give us encouragement when the world turns against reason and rationality like it did overnight.